afternoon. My name is LaCory Meadows. I am a member of the CMC Board of Trustees, and I also serve as the director of OSU Extension Franklin County. It's great to see everyone today. Today's forum, urban farming, not your backyard garden, is made possible with support from The Ohio State University. Please help me thank them and their associates that are here today. Urban farming is much more than a few tomato plants, zucchini, and a chicken. It's about innovation, tangible food production, and improving lives by connecting people to the food that they eat. To learn more about these exciting developments in food, we turn to our expert panel. Please welcome President and CEO of St. Stephen's Community House, Michelle Mills. Faculty Director of the Initiative for Food and Agricultural Transformation and the Kellogg Endowed Chair in Agricultural Ecosystems Management, that's a mouthful, at The Ohio State University, Casey Hoy. Chief Executive Cultivator at Swain Way Urban Farm, Joseph Swain. And our wonderful host, Major Gift Director, Mid-Ohio Food Bank, Elissa Schneider. Please welcome all of our speakers. Elissa, the podium is yours.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. This is such an interesting topic. I must admit, though, I come to you today with more questions than I do answers. Frankly, before I joined the team at Mid-Ohio Food Bank, my experience with farming was limited to a high school experience in Northwest Ohio. I shared a locker with a pig farmer. It's a true story. It's a smelly and true story. I do still eat bacon. Around the time I started with Mid-Ohio Food Bank, the organization was launching a new initiative called Urban Farms of Central Ohio. Soon enough, I was knee-deep in mud and salad greens, both literally and figuratively, trying to wrap my head around the difference between a high tunnel and a greenhouse and a garden and a farm. And I was interested. I was captivated by the capable hands of our farmer, Dana, who transformed vacant land literally into food. And I was excited by the response of the Marion Franklin community and the ownership of the farm itself by that community. And I think I was interested personally in a way that so many of us are. If you think of it, urban farms are a beautiful concept, reuniting humans and commerce and nature to solve the problems brought on by urbanization. It appears that we as a people want to reclaim, or at least recognize, our relationship to food and land. Urban farms have become a means to increase access to locally grown food and a way of reintroducing the public to the many aspects of food that we've lost as a culture. I'm not sure the exact date that our culture seemed to demand a turn back to the land, but I think of two pop culture milestones that come to mind for me. Number one, this country's odd fascination with that game Farmville from Facebook. I don't know what that's about. Number two, there are 9 Major League Baseball teams that now have urban farms on rooftops or adjacent to their ballpark. And I really thought ballparks were just about beer and hot dogs, but I guess they're growing food and selling it. The Columbus community has also embraced the movement. We've seen an influx of community gardens. We've funded them. We've been gracious with land bank land, and it seems each summer the farmers market schedules grow and grow. In the last decade, many local organizations have jumped from community gardens and into the much harder work of urban farming. And for the sake of our discussion today, let's define urban farms as an assumed level of commerce, of growing product to be sold, as opposed to being grown for personal consumption or for sharing. Many of those doing the harder work and forging the way and figuring it out are in the room today. Franklinton Gardens, Urban Farms of Central Ohio, Project Aquastar, Local Matters, The Ohio State University, Lettuce Works, vertical farming groups like Roots Up. I could go on and on. The nostalgia for a time past married with today's cities is what makes urban farming so special, so elusive even. But today I want us to see past the backyard garden and grapple with the actual reality of urban farming. I'd like us to consider the hurdles of space, time, and money, and then how do we measure success? So, with that all in mind, I'd like to start with, I think, an easy question, and this is for all three of you. Casey, maybe we'll start with you, since you're furthest away. Can you tell us how and why urban farming interests you, and what led you into this work?
Sure. Well, I'm interested in farming in general, and in agriculture. One of the things that I find really fascinating about urban agriculture and urban farming is I'm from more northern Ohio. I live in Worcester, and the cities that are around the Great Lakes region, some of you probably know, have lost population. It's opened up space in those cities, and agriculture is moving in. So we have agriculture moving into cities at the same time that the trends in people moving further out into the country has proceeded. So we have agriculture moving one way and people moving the other way, and it's mixing agriculture and all of us, and putting us closer together. I think that's very healthy for us as a people, to be more connected with agriculture.
Good. Michelle, you want to share with us how you got in the game?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great story. It's a story that I'm hoping to replicate with the children at St. Stephen's Community House. And that is that I started as a 4-H kid, very proud. And during the time of growing up in Cleveland, I was surrounded by lots of concrete. And we would have to get on a bus and pollute the city with a big bus driving out to the country to understand and appreciate fresh air. So kind of ironic about that, and tried to have a garden at our church, and we started off growing tomatoes. And with the tomatoes we used to provide pasta and spaghetti for the Tuesday night meals, the hot meals that we provided to families. Not much different than what I'm doing today. So I've been about 40 years in the making on this journey as a 4-H kid, and saw what it did for me, the leadership lessons through 4-H, the experience and appreciation of food consumption, and the fact that others did not have food as readily available as I did very early as age as a child growing up in inner city Cleveland, 82nd and Kinsman, which now is home to a great urban farm, and that's due to a lot of zoning and changes made at the city level in the city of Cleveland. And so with that, I was able to earn a scholarship in school, and so a lot of that access and opportunity that I've had, I hope to replicate for the children in Linden, and know that it can be done when we make smart decisions about the use of land and the intersection of the urban core and agriculture.
Joseph?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I got into urban farming through simply growing a backyard garden. In 2007, I moved to Columbus, Ohio, and I had a wonderful blank slate on the property I was living. Mostly grass and weeds growing in and around the house. And so I wanted to start taking my health and food security into my own hands, so we started a backyard garden. And over the years, as that grew, we discovered how you can grow an incredible amount of food in very small spaces. So with looking for, I have a blue-collar background, and looking for a career change, I decided and started researching urban farming as a path to make a living for myself. So within, all the health benefits we were seeing with growing food for ourselves, I thought, wow, what a great opportunity, what a great career that could be to grow food for other people. So a lot of this comes from the simple basis of food health, food sovereignty. Let's not undervalue the food that is being grown right in our backyards or on these empty plots throughout our city. This is literally the freshest, safest, most nutrient-dense, delicious food that we can consume and provide for ourselves and each other. And so that was a huge motivation for me.
Great. It's like a commercial. Now I want to talk about space. Open land obviously comes at a price, whether you're going on a rooftop, a parking lot, a storage container, in a warehouse, or on good old-fashioned dirt. Space comes at a premium in cities. And so we know an urban farm of 1 or 2 acres can produce a lot of food. But the population is also much denser in the city and around that plot of land, and so meaning more people to feed. Casey, can you talk a little bit about the measurement of a lot of food and what an urban farm might be able to produce on, say, an acre of space? I know it's not all literally dirt.
Sure.
Yeah.
Actually, if you give me about another 0.2 acres, that would be enough to feed one person a diet like the one that you're consuming for lunch here.
All right, that's fair.
For a full year. So it's about 1.2 acres per person is what are the estimates for what it takes to feed the U.S. population the diet that we consume. And if you want to look at the minimum amount of space needed to feed one person for an entire year, the estimates are somewhere around 0.07 hectares, which is about 0.17 acre. So about, the space that's not in house and driveway in a typical suburban lot is what it would take, and that'd be mostly a vegetarian diet. That if you add meat, you fairly quickly double it. So those are the kinds of figures that in terms of land that it takes to feed a person for an entire year. And the answer is there's not enough land in a city to do that, to feed the entire diet for someone for an entire year. So I had a student that actually looked at this, how much land was in private land in Columbus and moving out towards the urban areas. And he came up with about, if you take the total amount of private land that could be used for producing food and divide it by the number of people, it's about 5 square meters per person. So that's about like 3 feet by 16 feet or 2 raised beds. So that's not enough to match up with those figures for what it takes to produce a complete diet. But Joe's absolutely right. Even on very small spaces and the kind of land area that he's working with, you can produce an awful lot, and you can produce the kind of food that's often lacking in urban environments and is most helpful to health and both quality and quantity in terms of food that's really important in our diet.
Great. Joseph, maybe if you can expand a little bit on that and share how you use space to maximize a yield.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one of the major different factors in an urban farmer in comparison to an acreage farmer that's out in the country. So if you look at 10 acres of land and you have this incredible amount of space, I know 10 acres probably doesn't sound like a lot, but to me 10 acres is a huge amount of land. I feel like that may give an opportunity to kind of spread yourself out. But when you're pinned into very small, tight spaces, you become very creative on how you use that space. And every square inch of that space becomes valuable. So innovative, intensive techniques on how you're going to go about growing things, what crops you're going to grow to utilize that space very much comes into play. I don't know if anyone has been to my property. We have one of 3 sites. My front yard is completely loaded down with a dozen different kinds of berry bushes and strawberries and fruit trees. You go into the backyard, I have hoop house where we grow seedlings, chickens, intensive plot that we grow for commercial production. So there's very little space that's unutilized. And I think through that mentality of and being forced into how can we get the most out of this small space, you can really do some amazing things.
Great. Michelle, I know that for you, yield might mean a different thing than just a quota of veggies or tilapia. Can you tell me about what else is yielded out of the farming space you've carved out at St. Stephen's?
I would say Brighter Minds is one of our greatest yields from our urban farm, but I did want to also share comments that were talked about in use of space. So currently we have a half an acre, hoping to expand to a full acre. And farm raising fish, we've created sort of what I call a bunk bed technique of aquaponics. So they were able to grow microgreens and greens on top of where the tanks are, where the fish are being raised, to utilize space. As Joe talked about, when you have limited space and you're trying to have a greater yield, you get very creative with how to use that space. Our creative came from our young students who are studying engineering techniques and designing the tanks. And so it's a very inclusive process to farm design, layout, and yield. And in that is both not only engineering techniques, but also math and then science. And those are what we think is our greatest yield from our farm, is the minds that now say, maybe I should consider a career in marine biology, or maybe I should consider a career in science because I've had this early exposure to what science can do for not only me, but with smarter techniques and use of space, what I can now do for my community. And so maybe we're growing the next planners for community space, and maybe we're growing the next director of development for the city of Columbus in the future, which will have that experience about land use and importance of zoning and all of these different decisions and how it impacts the urban core. And so our greatest yield are the brighter minds of the children in Linden.
Steve, you've got about 10 more years before you're out of a job. So I want to move on and talk about time now. We've all heard the term slower than dirt, or it's as slow as watching grass grow. When I think of farming in time, I think of manpower or woman power, especially woman power. It takes to grow food anywhere, much less in the city, where time really is money. How do you engage others to join the work? And do you have the resources to pay other people to put the time in to really make an urban farm work? So I sort of want to talk about training, education. Joseph, you want to start?
Well, I can tell you as a business owner, and I'm sure all businesses across the board, we could use more time in any given day. There's never enough time. Unfortunately, for a for-profit business like ours, being in an industry, organic farming, there's not a lot of room. No one's getting rich, no one's wealthy growing organic vegetables. It's a very challenging field. So yes, unfortunately, we don't have a budget to house a lot of employees. Usually, we have anywhere from one full-time employee. We've gone back and forth to 2 or 3 part-time employees. So we do have employees, but it's minimal. What we found is a great way to engage, and people actually have engaged us probably more so, looking for ways to get involved in the local food system, in growing food on urban farms and backyards. So we get an awful lot of volunteers, which is very helpful. And this year, something we're doing is we're starting an internship program where we're trying to house 2 people for 20 hours a week through each season. So not only will that be incredibly beneficial for our workload, but it's a great way, like I said, there's so many people that want to get involved and be active within this realm, for those to come alongside us, work with us, learn about local food, the local food system, and whether they start their own backyard garden or someone wants to start their own urban farm or just a general wanting to be involved, should be good. I'm hoping it'll be really great this year.
Great. Casey, anything to expand on that?
Yeah, I guess, I would just add a couple of things. One is that this challenge of labor is something that goes across the entire agricultural system, whether we're talking urban or rural or anywhere in between. One of my feelings is that really part-time is okay, especially in urban agriculture. I have tremendous respect for folks like Joe who are taking this on as a challenge to make the entire living that way. But I see a lot of people that it's just part of how they live. And if you think about it, that's really what agriculture has been for most of our human history. You know, it's part of the way you live and one of the things you do, but not everything that you do. So I think there's a lot of room for that in urban agriculture. And then the last thing I'd say is this is a case for innovation. I have a number of my faculty colleagues that are here who are working very hard on this. How do you create a different kind of economy than economy of scale, an economy that would work at Joe's scale? We think about, well, my economist friends call it the economy of scope. So it's the economy that you gain from the kind of diversity that Joe has on his farm.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's more about the lifestyle. We see people that want to get involved with this. You know, it's not about making a lot of money, but people that really have the heart, that care about the health of people.
So a follow-up question maybe for Michelle. I know Aquastar and many of the other nonprofit farms in the city are committed to training and education programs as an important component, and you've talked a little bit about that, but can you share a little bit more about how that's important to the success of your farm?
Oh, it's absolutely important. So in the summertime, we have the opportunity to work with youth summer employment, and we have the opportunity to engage some of our young people into the work of farming. And our whole goal is to ignite, excite, and then they'll learn. And so we like to ignite their interest in it, from the farm to the table to how it impacts my community, and that entire span of learning. We hope it gets the excitement and the igniting of them to learn and continue in the path of agriculture or somewhere related. We have a full curriculum that we offer to our summer camp students as well, and so in summer they're learning. This year we're starting pollination from beginning. We were donated some beehives, and so that'll be a lesson that they'll have from beginning to end and understand the importance of that right in their own community. And for me, we have the opportunity to touch more children that way because we're right in the city. There's no travel. We don't need vehicles to take children out far. They can have experiences in less than 5 miles from their home, and so that in itself is a lesson, and also the lesson to talk about the nutrient intensity of the food because of less travel, as Joe mentioned earlier, and that's a whole nother lesson in itself. The fish farming is one of our greatest aspects that the children get very excited about. They name the fish, they call them names, they get excited about them, they want to see what happens to them. I ate a few of them, so I had to explain that, but I ate Johnny and Sally and and hope to eat her cousins too. So that's probably, for us, the fish farming is one of those, water. Most children get excited around water, and it makes our insurance company nervous, but the kids get excited about the water, and that begins the conversation. Again, it's the ignite, excite, and then they'll learn, experience, and they'll retain. And so those are some of the tools that we use in terms of our curriculum. It's the experimental hands-on and the sticks with them, which is the retention, and that's where some of our students are losing in terms of school level of retention, in terms of information and foundational learning. So we have seen the hands-on learning exacerbate lessons a million times over, and so that's our goal. We do have a limited staff, which we're able to use our summer camp counselors to help, but farm hands, as you heard my other panelists share, it's a challenge, but we still try to work through it because you're not getting rich in growing food in its natural state. It's just not happening. We're just trying to get to the point of sustainable operations. And that's a tough thing to do. But we also have started what's called Aqua Sprouts, which are our smaller gardens right at schools, at the elementary schools in Linden. So there's Aquastar, which is the mother of the urban farms in Linden, and then there's Aqua Sprouts at Linden Elementary.
Great. That's sort of a nice segue to jumping in and talking a little bit about money. For many for-profit farm ventures, there seems to be an inclination towards lettuce and green growing. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems like greens are king in urban farming. And can you tell me if this is true and why? Joseph, you want to take a stab at that?
I would say that would be true.
Yeah.
I guess first and foremost, leafy greens, especially lettuce, is one of the most highly consumed vegetables on the planet. So that's one reason. And also the second would be high square foot value. So if you take, for instance, a head of broccoli, a broccoli plant is going to grow roughly 3 by 3 foot, 9 square foot. and you're going to get, $3-4 out of a head of broccoli in a high retail setting. If you plant lettuce in that same 9 square foot, do the math. You can probably do
It's bad math.
nine times that worth of lettuce in the same space. And so, off the top of my head, don't quote me on that number, please. But yeah, there's just there's certain crops that you can grow very intensively that bring a higher dollar for the square foot that you're using.
Casey, anything else to add about the particular financial advantage of certain veggies?
Sure. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with another dad while our kids played on a playground one time. And he told me that he had just purchased a new Lexus and socked away the money for his 5-year-old daughter's freshman year on 20 acres of arugula in South Jersey. Sold to very high-end Manhattan restaurants, of course.
Sure.
But yeah, there's a financial advantage to vegetables. They can be very high-end. If you get into really high quality, that can be valuable. From my point of view as an ecologist, they're also very diverse. So we're talking about dozens of species and hundreds of cultivars if you get into it. And that kind of diversity is what you need for the kind of ecosystem services that can lower the costs on the production side of producing them. So it's the ecosystem services like nutrient cycling and complex food webs that control pests biologically, all part of that economy of scope.
Great. And Casey, I'd like your perspective on this question as well. From a nonprofit perspective and a community perspective, not all farms are entirely self-sustaining from farm sales. I know with Urban Farms of Central Ohio, we're increasing revenue streams by selling at farmers market and directly to restaurants. But community education, training, and providing low-cost fresh vegetables for the neighborhood are a vital piece of our mission that don't make us any money. And can you tell me about your experience with this balance and that struggle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're right back to the real harvest that Michelle shared a little while ago. I mean, it's about healthy minds and healthy bodies. So groups that I know that use farming as a way of helping people include groups working with veterans who have both physical and mental challenges. Coming back, the MRDD boards, we have working with groups that are working with returning citizens, so people who have been incarcerated and have real trouble finding a job while growing and selling produce that's healthy and to neighbors in their community is a very good way of getting back into society in a very productive way. I've known people that have worked in a few kinds of operations that really focus on mental health. So Bittersweet Farms in northwestern Ohio work with people with autism. And I have a colleague who's worked with Gould Farms, which was also one that was using agriculture as a way of healing mental illness. And then there's the physical illness. Colleen Speece, who's here with us today, leads the Garden of Hope at Ohio State University. This is a cancer survivors garden, and she and her colleagues are putting numbers on the biometric measures of their health as they engage in gardening. But the kind of stories are things like folks being out in the garden and saying, well, I could kind of feel the cancer draining out of my body and melting away into the soil. So what's the value of that? I mean, that's something that goes well beyond
Value of a life?
Yeah, exactly.
So switching gears a little bit, Joseph, I know you started the Columbus Agrarian Society, a resource center to support other for-profit farm ventures. If you could give future urban farmers a piece of advice on staying in the black, making money, what would that be?
They're, again, very similar, I think, to an intelligent way to go about any business. Start small. You have to be creative in this field. Do something very unique. Grow slowly. Patience is a big thing. You know, we set goals that are years and years ahead of what our potential is today. And I think one of the most important things is use the resources that are in front of you. So When we started the farm in 2010 was our first season. I think I maybe grew $15,000 worth of vegetables that we sold to a couple restaurants and the farmers market there in our community. But we grew that food with the garden tools that I already had from growing food for myself. And that's where we started with what we had. We did the capacity. We didn't take a huge capital investment, which is going to sink you into debt from day one. So we went from that $15,000. The next year, I think we grew $30,000. The next year, we grew $75,000. And you know, this being our sixth season, we're projecting $150,000 in sales. And like I said, that started with a backyard garden with the tools that we already possessed.
The ultimate startup, huh? In a few minutes, we'll move to audience questions, and you can gather at the microphone in the middle of the room. But let me ask the panel this final thought. How can this city and its people make it easier for urban farms to thrive? And this is for all three of you. So whoever'd like to go first. Michelle?
I'm eyeing Director Shoney. I'm trying not to throw him under the bus as best I can. But I think, just as I talked about in my opening, that the lessons, the exchange and the importance and stressing it today in children now for the future, so that we're not at the point of crisis when it comes to land, agriculture, and food. And as our population continues to outpace production, that's a concern. And so that's not just a concern for this country, it's a concern for the world in terms of population growth in many parts of the world and other countries. And so I think that we're not exempt from that if we don't get smarter. And so what matters is that we are continuing to plant the seed, no pun intended, but truly intended, and making sure that our lessons of today and the things and the decisions that we make today, as Joe talked about with his, that we don't make them in the future. And I think that's one of the things that I hope comes up today. I think there's decisions in terms of zoning and building and zoning matters that I think we need to think about when it comes to agriculture and making some changes to make it a more smoother process. I'm very proud of some of the folks like the Seasoned Farmhouse and their work and smartly using their land in terms of both business and co-op and making those smart decisions. Tricia and her team, I think, making it a very individualized experience and then replicating from there in terms of from the farm and their yard to learning how to cook it to then prepare it to then share it. And so I think investing in partners like that and businesses who want to open like that, having some seamless processes for them and working with them from a land use. Sorry, Director Shoney.
A to-do list, maybe.
Yes.
Casey, anything to expand on that?
I think there are actually a lot of ways that the city of Columbus can help urban farms thrive, and they're really what you can do to help the farms as well as what you can do, each of us can do in our own lives. So there's designing our own landscapes and how we incorporate food in those landscapes, whether they're public or private. There's the policies, the laws, the candidates that you support and what they're saying about the importance of food in the city and in the region. There's the business side, the businesses you choose to support, the businesses you choose to form. Can have a big impact on making it possible for folks like Joe to farm in a city like Columbus. There's a connection with health and the recognition that food is health, and how does that really play into maintaining our health. And if you think about it, all those are kind of the culture side of agriculture. So I got to put the ecologist hat back on. There's still the agri side. So recognize what it does for our environment and the quality of life in having that greenery around you.
Joseph?
Incentivize, educate, I think setting, guidelines and regulations in place that encourage, the growth of food within our city is most important.
Michelle, real quick.
I just have to add one more. I totally agree, and Joe kind of said it. We have to incentivize those who source locally. and let them know that I'm choosing to eat at your restaurant, or I'm choosing to come to the North Market because of the freshness, because of the farmers, and that making it more profitable exchange. I think incentivizing those who are sourcing local helps the rest of the farms. And it lets people know that I'm in the right direction in terms of people appreciate this, even though I may pay a few cents more for its natural state, because it's not very cheap to grow in natural state, so it costs and things like that. So when you support the North Market, or you support those who source locally, who buys from Joe, who buys from Aquastar, that really helps. And when you let them know, I'm eating here or I'm shopping here because you source locally, that sort of incentivizing continues them to do that, and that helps all of us in terms of incentivizing the supporters who source locally.
Thank you. So it is CMC's tradition to take audience questions. Please state your name, ask your question, and we thank you in advance, Jim, for not making long editorial comments. So, Jim, go ahead.
Hi, Jim Coe from WCBE NPR Radio. Thank you for coming. I think you've excited a lot of us here about this growing industry that I hope continues to grow. A couple months ago, Columbus Underground had a short article about a local developer that is purchasing or has purchased a building about a mile east of here on Long Street in the Near East Side with the intention of a vertical garden. And I'd like to see if how knowledgeable, or if you have any case histories from other vertical gardens. Is it a model that could catch on here in Columbus?
I've seen it work in Chicago. I want to say Iron Gardens. I want to say it's on the west side of Chicago. They use warehouses to use for vertical gardens, and I think there's also another model operating in Kentucky where they've used warehouses and buildings for vertical gardens just to make use of vacant commercial properties. But that's all. In terms of the particular developer you're mentioning in town, I don't have a lot of knowledge on that.
I don't think his background is farming either, so I just kind of wonder if any vertical gardens already exist in Central Ohio.
Not that I'm aware.
Any experience? Any thoughts on
I don't know
vertical?
exactly what you mean by a vertical garden.
Going upwards. A confined space like a building, an empty building.
Well, I mean, for instance, in our warehouse, I would guess you could say that we grow vertically. We grow microgreens on racks that are 3 levels high.
Okay.
Our mushrooms grow in hoop houses inside the warehouse. There again, our shelving, our rack systems are multiple levels high. I don't know, when I hear of vertical farming, I think of high technology and a lot of dollars going into those systems, but I feel like ours is very simple, traditional ways of growing, but they're again utilizing indoor spaces vertically. But I don't have much knowledge on some of those high technology vertical systems that you see across the country.
Hopefully something to look forward to.
Maybe that'll be
Thank you.
another forum. Next question.
Brian Williams, agriculture specialist, MORPC. A little bit of a disconnect here. On the one hand, from a grower perspective, the most lucrative thing is a lot of the microgreens, the high-end things. But then we look at the community needs and the underserved areas, and they're not the people who are going to be eating the high-end microgreens. How do we democratize local food a little bit more?
I think people should be eating microgreens more so. First of all, you know, it's I guess you could say it's kind of has a reputation of being a garnish in a high-end restaurant, but I feel like we've worked very hard to change the perception of how to utilize microgreens. They are an incredibly nutrient-dense food source that can be grown year-round, and I think if a family took a one rack, one shelf system, which is a 4-tray system, on a weekly rotation, they could have more greens fresh cut in their house than they would know what to do with. So the perception has to change of what a microgreen is and how it's utilized, it is an incredibly valuable food source. They're easy to grow, and you can grow an awful lot of them with very little setup and infrastructure and upfront cost.
And I think perhaps from a Mid-Ohio Food Bank and Urban Farms of Central Ohio perspective, for us, it's a balance of growing a certain percentage of those microgreens that we can sell at a profit, and then a real diversity of fruits and vegetables that are wanted and needed in that neighborhood. And we are giving out microgreens as well in the neighborhood to the at the Pay What You Can produce stand. But it certainly is a balance and something I think that we continue to be mindful of.
I think the way you democratize it is you give people the opportunity to do that production themselves and make the choice of, which microgreens and how to produce them. I think that gets back to Thomas Jefferson's idea of democracy that's rooted in people that have a distinct connection to a land and place.
Next question.
Yes, hello. I've been listening a lot about growing, and what I haven't heard is a discussion on biomass. Can you speak, and Michelle, I understand that you use tilapia, but can you speak to how you implement biomass in your urban garden? Because for my garden, that's been one of the biggest obstacles, is converting the built environment into nutrient-rich environment. I don't want to use oil, so I incorporate animals like rabbits and ducks and chickens. Do you guys implement livestock into your urban garden, and how?
Go ahead.
Yes, we do use backyard chickens is one example. I feel like for my operation personally, it was very thought out, but we produce massive amounts of organic matter that go back into our soil. I haven't tested my soil for years because the vegetables I grow tell me everything is balanced and in check. But last time I got a soil test, I had organic matter percentages of 7 to 10%, which you compare that to, they say for an organic farmer, 5% is really good. In our conventional row cropping industrial systems, we're depleting the organic matter down 1-2%. So we do that by with backyard chickens, and this is something that needs to be taken into consideration as the city creates policy on urban farming, and I know they're revisiting the whole chicken thing. I would love for them to come visit my setup because it is a beautiful symbiotic relationship that happens. It creates our fertilization, and the chickens create food for us, and it's a cycle. So I funnel everything into, which would be currently illegal with the city regulation on chickens and impervious floors. We cycle all of our garden waste through our chickens. We have our spent substrates from mushroom production, carbon, sawdust, straw. That all filters through my chicken coop in my backyard. And so what happens is the chickens add the nitrogen source to the carbon, which balances that out. Deep litter systems have been used traditionally for centuries and centuries. Well, they want us to have impervious floors. It makes no sense to me. These organic matters absorb the waste. It's combined with the carbon, and it creates on-site fertilization. It's so ecologically sound, it's ridiculous. And we need to start looking at these systems in this way.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I do want to add the entire concept of aquaponics is exactly that. We're using the waste from the fish that then provides the nutrient water that grows the greens on top of the bunk bed style of tanks. And so it's a complete symbiotic relationship between growing the greens and the fish and their waste. So we're absolutely using that system in terms of our aquaponics. We're hoping to grow the chickens, but I'm going to also say ditto to what Joe talked about. There's rules that must be changed, and it feels so funny pointing at the city from where I sit today. But there is a need to address those regulations. We like to move into chickens, but based on where we are, size, and all those things, there's a few rules that we have to get get through and to move into the chicken realm, which we hope to do in the next 2 years. But to answer the question, we are absolutely using that, and we do recycle all of our waste throughout the entire agency. We just adopted 4 new policies for our staff as an organization. So all of our waste that we use when cooking for our child care center, when cooking for our seniors, and all of that waste, we try to recycle what we can there. That goes into our compost bin, and we are a Class 2 facility at St. Stephen's, which we're very proud of in terms of our soil, which is considered more of a soil enhancement. And so we're using that entire relationship, that symbiotic relationship throughout our entire farm to answer the question. I forgot where the gentleman went, so I hope I answered your question.
All right, next question.
Hi, Patrick Sandman. I work down the street at NiSource. And within the last year, I saw a story on CBS Sunday Morning about AgriHoods and was inspired, to say the least. I think it's a great idea. And for those of you here that don't know what I'm talking about, it's a neighborhood, and instead of building a golf course in the middle of it, you build a farm. And it has all sorts of benefits. Yeah, thank you. So I'm wondering, it seems like there is a great demand for organic food in Columbus or Central Ohio. And it sounds like there are a lot of people that are eager to help, volunteer, pursue a career in this field. So where's the miss? Where are the AgriHoods in Columbus? They seem to be wildly successful in other places. Is it realistic here? Can we do it in downtown? I think as we discussed today, these topics, there were 3 new apartment complexes that were just built. So I feel like there's a lot of building, there's a lot of development. Where are the AgriHoods? Thank you.
Anyone have? I'm guessing that perhaps there's 2 flyers also at your tables for something that the Franklin Park Conservatory is doing, and OSU Extension, that perhaps those are great issues, and maybe that discussion can really be furthered in both of those, just to kind of give a plug. Go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, I think they are feasible here as they are elsewhere, and they've been successful elsewhere. And I know I've seen plans and designs for AgriHoods that are coming out of our Knowlton School of Architecture, Landscape Architecture Department. I've seen some really interesting designs that have been proposed for Columbus in that area.
Great. Nick, last question.
Nick Stanich with Franklinton Gardens. Can you touch on distribution strategies within the city of Columbus right now, the current realities, and how that might change as in the years to come as urban agriculture becomes more and more popular and local food becomes a higher priority within the population?
I think I understand your question, but I'm not sure. The other panelists can chime in.
What do you do with the produce when you grow it? Like, how do you make sure you get it somewhere
That's what I thought
and quickly
you said. I was going to cut
before
to
perishability
the, what do you do
becomes an
once
issue?
you grow it? So for us, because we're on a smaller scale of production, we're still looking to make sure that we're in all the local farmers markets. That's tough to do with 1.5 employees for the farm and manage the farm at the same time. And so keeping up with production and demand, we try not to get out too far ahead of ourselves in terms of being able to keep up with production. That's the number one goal, because you have to rely on so many other different things. But one of the main things is not to commit in terms of being able to produce for purposes of distribution over what you can really truly produce. Year-round production is the name of the game these days, and really trying to figure out how to manage that. But even with this winter, there's no way of saying what you can plan for, looking at the way the environment is and the climate has an impact on growing. So that continues to be a challenge in order to keep up with the distribution that's needed.
I guess from my perspective, it's distribution, it's also preservation, storage, preparation. There's a lot of steps in our food chain. We're talking about having those occur at very local scales, but I think that's a tremendous amount of additional opportunity for businesses that can support local farming. There was a study done for the Fund for Our Economic Future that I collaborated with in Northeast Ohio that estimated about 8,000 jobs and $1.35 billion in import substitution, which is essentially doing here instead of importing. And so it's a tremendous amount of opportunity and a tremendous opportunity for innovation, because we don't have those systems at those scales now.
All right, thank you very much. LaCour, the stage is yours.
Well, what an insightful discussion. Thanks to each of you. I hope that you all enjoyed today's forum. We encourage you to continue the conversation in the lobby with coffee and cookies. You can view and share today's forum and all of our forums on CTV Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide through the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. So let's thank our sponsors, The Ohio State University, and as well as our speakers, Michelle Mills, Casey Hoy, Joseph Swain, Elissa Schneider. And thanks to all of you for being here. We look forward to seeing you at CMC again soon. Have a great afternoon.